Okay, hey everybody, Tekking here. This is a little new, but today we're going to be talking about, what's it called again? JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Yeah, okay. So I just finished reading, part 1 today, therefore I feel like I am qualified to make a theory video about the entire series. I'm just kidding. I've read up to, about halfway through part 4. Admittedly, I kind of have stopped reading it in the past few weeks, but that's how I am with long-running manga series. I mean, this shit's been in serialization since the fucking 80s. A lot of times I need to take a break for a few months before I get back into it, not to say that I'm not intrigued by the series, but I just need to take a break. You don't even want to know how long it took me to finish One Piece going along that system. It's just how I am. But after reading the original trilogy all the way through, which, by the way, Hirohiko intended that to be it. He intended just an original, trilogy of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. But after reading all 3, I think I can make one video because I think it's something that is worthy discussion, and that's what the fuck happened to Hamon? The primary energy source, the primary weapon of choice for the main character in parts 1 and 2. It was kind of like a chi energy-based ability that had a bunch of different uses, and then just kind of fell out of use by part 3. By part 3, we had incorporated stands into the mix, which I will admit are a lot cooler because they implement like different designs for each individual stand, as well as a wide array of powers. When you had Hamon, I mean, there was a lot of shit we've seen Jonathan and Joseph do with it, but at the end of the day, it was kind of limited when you compare the vast array of abilities that stands could implement. So from just a storytelling perspective, that's probably why Hirohiko switched it over. You know, like maybe he felt like he reached the cap on what he could do with Hamon, and he didn't want to keep stretching it. Maybe he thought like, all right, I can either completely retcon Hamon into something it's not, or I can just create a whole nother power source for the main cast to utilize, and I think that's what he did in part 3, and I think that was a fairly smart maneuver there. But just the question of, you had this power that was utilized very heavily in parts 1 and 2, a little bit in part 3 by older Joseph, but by part 4 it's hardly mentioned and not used at all, and then after that, after the original cast, we don't see Joseph anymore after part 4. It's pretty much just completely lost to every JoJo's character after that. I am not referring to part 7, which is Steel Ball Run, which does have a similar technique called the spin, because that takes place, of course, in a different universe. We're only talking about the first universe, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure series, from parts 1, Phantom Blood, all the way up to part 6, Stone Ocean. I have not read Stone Ocean or part 5, or not even all of part 4, but I understand that Hamon is not used there at all, although characters such as Jotaro do appear there. So this is just going to be my thoughts on exactly why Hamon stopped being utilized in the story itself, rather than the meta of why Hirohiko stopped utilizing it. And just looking a little bit into Hamon itself, because I know maybe a lot of people probably don't remember it all that well if you're really far into the JoJo verse. You might have, forgotten about that, or maybe not remember it so well. So, Ripple or Hamon is a technique utilized by people that know Sendo. Sendo is actually the name of the martial art. It stands for Way of the Hermit, or Way of the Wizard. So, someone like Zeppeli would be like, I, practiced Way of the, Sendo, Way of the Hermit, in order to utilize Hamon. Okay, so it's like the ones like the actual teaching of the martial art rather than the ability itself. I suppose it would be possible for you to learn Ripple on your own, and in that case, it wouldn't be Sendo, it would be whatever method you came up with, but Sendo is just the way it's used in the story. So Hamon takes cues from your breathing, so if like your physical body, as well as takes energy that's similar to the sun's energy. So whenever you use Hamon, your body gives off this glowish tint to it, as if, the sun's energy, his power is radiating from you. But in order to keep it active, you have to keep your breathing steady and constant. So if you get, if you're underwater, you're somewhere like that, or if the breath is knocked out of you, if someone lands a solid hit on you and your breathing is interrupted, your Hamon will fall apart, which is a very critical weakness. Maybe that's another reason it wasn't used later on, because that, keeping that breathing steady, there's a lot of ways that could be fucked up later on. Now, the technique itself was primarily used to combat the undead, because that's another thing you might have noticed. Hamon started to fall off being used right around the time that the main villains of the story up to that point stopped being used. By this case, I mean the undead. because that's how part 1 and 2 rolled. You know, it was Dio was a vampire, you know, created other zombies and vampires to do his bidding, and that shit. That carries over, of course, to part 2, where you have the Pillar Men and you have other vampires being used by them, and even up to part 3 to an extent with Vanilla Ice, you know. But after that, the undead stop being used. At least I really hope they are, because I don't know, and I hope that they don't be used, because then I'll look like a complete fucking dumbass. Like, actually, Tekking, you know, in part 6, there is a vampire character, and I'm like, shit. Okay, well, as far as I'm aware, they're not used after that. The point I'm trying to get across here is that Hamon is only really useful against undead characters. Now, it is used against living characters, but never used in the same way to actually damage them. Hamon gives off the life energy, or the energy of the sun. The sun here can be seen as like a pure good entity to combat the denizens of the night. You know, it's very symbolic. It's kind of what Hirohiko does earlier on in the, you know, the JoJo series. So yeah, if a zombie gets, or a vampire, any of the Pillar Men, any undead creature gets hit with fucking fistful of Hamon, you know, then their skin will start to fucking melt and they'll begin to dissolve, and it's their natural freaking enemy. When Wamu got hit by it in part 2 by Joseph, you know, it circulated through his whole body and he basically began to come apart, you know, from the inside out. So very dangerous to them. Hamon can be used on living people, but it's never been used to just like, I'm gonna use Hamon to fucking blow your ass up from the inside. Hamon has been used to heal people, as Zeppeli used it to heal Jonathan with his broken arm, as well as it has been used to hypnotize people, as when Caesar used it to hypnotize a young lady in Venice, you know, when, was it Rome or Venice? I don't know, this series jumps around a lot. Whenever he first met Joseph, he used Hamon to put a woman into a trance to kind of distract Joseph while they were fighting. So yeah, though, it's never been seen used in an offensive way against people, so that's a big issue when after part 3, you're not dealing with vampires, you're not dealing with zombies anymore, you're dealing with normal humans, for the most part, stand users that are the main threats. So that's probably one reason why it was stopped being used. I have another idea as well. And this is delving a little bit more into the lore of everything, but remember, this Hamon, this Sendo, was taught by people like Tom Petty, who was Zeppeli's master. You know, it was like a Tibetan order of monks that has existed for about 2,000 years to combat the Pillar Men. That was the whole deal with them. So Zeppeli went and learned it there from Tom Petty, and then he met Jonathan and gave him instruction on how to use it and everything like that. We have never really understood, you know, Jonathan did not teach Hamon to his grandchild. Of course, Jonathan died before George was even born. Jonathan's son, did not have Hamon as well. By the time we got to Joseph, he was just a natural at it, so we don't really know how that goes. That's probably more plot convenience than anything. But the main problem is that Tom Petty, after he passed the teachings of Sendo and Hamon down to who? He passed it down to Straitso. And what the fuck did Straitso do? Straitso decided to fucking, you know, throw that out the fucking window. Thousands of years of, like, living the monk life, and he betrayed the order, and then took a stone mask, tried to kill Speedwagon, and became a vampire. This eventually led to him trying to kill Joseph, one of the last people that were aware of all this shit. My god, I just realized there's a lot of shit going on in this plot. Someone that hasn't read JoJo's, I don't know why the fuck you'd still be watching this by now, but you're sitting there like, what the fuck? It seems to piece so much together, Tekking, but damn, this is confusing. But anyway, yeah, Straitso fought against Joseph. Joseph eventually beat him into a corner, and Straitso killed himself. He had Hamon overload himself in his body, and he exploded, essentially. And from all we know, the teachings of Sendo could have died right there. You might be thinking, well, aren't there other people in the order that could have maybe taken Straitso's place? Well, there's a few problems with that. So, when Straitso arrived on Speedwagon's request to go investigate that tomb in Mexico, that's the point where Straitso decided to, betray everybody and take the mask. He had 2 followers with them. I'm going to assume that these 2 followers Straitso had with him were the best students he had, because remember, when it's kind of similar to what happened with Tom Petty. When Tom Petty arrived in England during part 1, he brought Straitso and Dyer with him, who were like 2 of the best students he had. So I like to think that's a mirror of it. Straitso brought his 2 best disciples on Speedwagon's request, and then he killed both of them, and then he betrayed everybody, and then he killed himself eventually. So it's my understanding that the teacher of of the Sendo, that would be Straitso at the time, he died, as well as the two best disciples of it. They're both dead. It's entirely possible the order might have just collapsed after that point. You're not having any Hamon being taught at all. Plus, remember, the whole point was teaching Hamon was to kind of combat the Pillar Men. Because the Pillar Men figured out, like, oh shit, there are these special humans called Hamon users, let's slaughter them. And then they did that, and then they went into hibernation for 2,000 years, and the small group of Hamon users rose back up, built the order in Tibet to try to eventually combat them. But after the exploits of Joseph, blasting fucking cars into space, becoming space cars, off on space adventures. Inawamu and AC/DC are both dead. All the vampires, all the zombies are fucking dead. They kind of won. The Hamon users kind of came out triumphant there. There's really no reason to teach it anymore. There's no more zombies. There's no more vampires. There's no more Pillar Men. Well, there is Pillar Men, but Cars is floating fucking, miles away in fucking space. He's never coming back. So there's really no point to have it anymore. I figure the order after Straitso left and never came back, and the two best disciples are gone, I figured the order just kind of dissolved as there was no more use for it. Of course, Hamon is used by Joseph in part 3 a little bit, to fight against the Empress. Later on, you see Joseph in part 4, but I believe he doesn't use Hamon in part 4, whether or not him being, he aged like an old man, like he's in his fucking 90s by part 80s in part 4. So perhaps he's a little bit senile too, so maybe he just lost the fucking knowledge of it, chose to age normally, or he's so old he can't have the breathing techniques he used to have, so he can't utilize Hamon anymore. Obviously, he's not in the state to teach it to anybody, and then after Joseph passed away, that was pretty much done. It's also very clear that certain characters, I guess, just can't use Hamon, because you'd figure, like, George, who's Jonathan's son, how Jonathan learned Hamon. He didn't know it originally. Zeppeli had to do that little diaphragm finger poke thing, and that awakened his power of Hamon. But even with Zeppeli and Jonathan dead, the knowledge of Hamon still existed, Arena knew about it, Straitso knew about it, and George, you think Straitso, and this is back when Straitso was a good guy, you think Straitso would be like, hey George, come over here, I'll try to teach you Hamon or something, I don't know. So maybe it's just the case it skips generations. Nobody can ever learn about it, so you had Joseph know it, and then Jotaro could not learn it. By the time Jotaro had a kid and Jolene, by that point it's part 6, and stands have pretty much been established in the story as the main, focus of battle. Then, of course, we get to part 7, which is Steel Ball Run, which I, of course, have not gotten to yet, but I hear it's amazing, so maybe I'll fall in love with that when I get to it. But I hear it's basically like a redone version of part 1, just in a different universe. So similar characters, but the plot is different, and just the characters' names are different. But you can line up who is who in the Steel Ball Run universe. But it has a completely different plot, and everything like that. There's just an ability that is, and I believe stands are still used in Steel Ball Run. It's like a combination of the two to kind of keep homage to part 1, but then after that we get into the current JoJo part 8, and I don't believe Hamon is used there as well, although I haven't read it, so I don't know. But yeah, I guess I want to diversify, make a JoJo's video, talk about something I know about, I guess a little bit. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like and comment below if you want to hear more JoJo's comment from me. I haven't even read fucking half of the story yet, so I don't know how much more I can talk about, but I'm a pretty good expert on parts 1 and 2, I'd assume. Part 3 is a little bit longer, but I think I know it fairly well. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This will be Tekking101 signing out. Later, guys.